Ever feel like you want to really get a handle on something, is important, but the thought of like wading through all the articles and books and stuff is just overwhelming?
Totally. It's like, who has the time for all that?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're here for, to do that deep dive for you. Today, we're tackling negotiation.
Yeah. Which, let's face it, it's something we're doing all the time, whether we realize it or not.
Right. And using your shared materials, especially the only negotiating guide you'll ever need to like guide us through it.
It's such a practical guide, really gets down to the nitty-gritty.
Absolutely. So get ready for some like aha moments and actionable tips that'll change how you approach your next negotiation, big or small.
What's so cool about this guide is the range of people who endorse it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got business heavy hitters like John Vella and Marilyn Owsley.
Yeah, and Mary Kelly.
Mike Dunn, Brad Gessner. The list goes on. People from all sorts of industries saying this book is the real deal, whether you're a newbie or you've been negotiating for years.
Totally. It really shows how important this skill is no matter what you do.
For sure.
And I think it's worth mentioning the dedication in the book to Brittany Starks-Flaherty and the call to sign the organ donor registry.
Yeah. A powerful reminder that some things in life are just not negotiable.
Right. Those truly important things.
Absolutely. And then when you look at the examples the book uses to show like how broad negotiation really is, it's amazing. I mean, it's not just about hammering out terms for a merger or acquisition, the big business stuff.
Right, right.
It goes way beyond that.
Yeah.
Like figuring out how much screen time your kids get, or coordinating vacation schedules at work, even planning a family vacation, where to go, when to go.
It's like every part of life, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
Even things like trying to get a better deal on your internet service or arguing about shipping costs online.
Or even, those spirited discussions about whether you really need that giant new TV.
Oh, for sure.
So negotiation is like woven into the fabric of our lives.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do today is unpack those core principles of negotiation, the strategies, the aha moments that you can actually put into practice.
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right, so the book lays out 4 ways a negotiation can end up, starting with probably the least desirable, the lose-lose. What does that actually look like?
It's exactly what it sounds like. Neither side is happy. They both probably feel worse off than before they even started talking.
Ouch.
The book gives this example of a company that went with the cheapest consulting firm to do an employee opinion survey. They thought, great, we saved some money. Well, the service was terrible, the data was unreliable, employees were unhappy, and the consulting firm, while they got the contract, probably took a hit to their reputation.
So no one really wins.
Exactly. And the book talks about labor strikes, too. Everyone loses when work grinds to a halt.
It's that lasting negative effect that makes lose-lose so bad.
Right. Because when you have that resentment, that lingering negativity, it's unlikely those parties will want to negotiate again.
Yeah, you close off opportunities for both sides.
You do. Then you've got win-lose, or the flip side, lose-win.
At least someone's happy there, right?
Well, the thing is, even if you win in a win-lose situation, the other person's unhappiness can come back to bite you.
How so?
They'll feel like their needs weren't met, like they were taken advantage of.
Yeah.
So they'll be resentful. Like if you strong-arm someone into taking a bad loan because they were desperate.
Yeah, I can see how that would backfire.
Totally. The book says almost all win-lose relationships eventually become lose-lose. If someone constantly feels like they're getting the short end of the stick, they'll go elsewhere.
Makes sense. So you lose a customer or partner in the long run.
You do. And that's not good for anyone.
Which leads us to the ideal. Win-win. Everyone feels good. Everyone gets something they need.
Yeah, that's the gold standard, for sure. Both sides feel like their needs have been met. It creates positive feelings and builds a foundation for working together again in the future.
It's like building that trust.
Exactly. The book uses the example of the U.S. and Cuba normalizing relations during the Obama administration.
Oh, wow. That's a great example on a huge scale.
It is. They'd had this really tense relationship for decades, but they found a way forward.
Prisoner exchange, opening up travel and trade.
Right. Benefits for both countries.
And Pope Francis was even involved, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it really underscores the significance of it. Of course, there were different opinions on both sides, and it was a complex situation. But overall, both countries had a lot to gain.
So a true win-win on a global level.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, the last outcome the book talks about is no outcome.
Which almost sounds like nothing happened.
It might seem that way, but no outcome can actually be a smart move. Like if you're buying a car and you just can't get to a price that works for both you and the dealer.
You walk away.
Yeah. No deal.
Knowing when to say, this isn't working.
Exactly. And sometimes, the book says, that no outcome now can actually lead to a win-win later, maybe with a different dealer or even a different car. But it could also be a lose-lose if you wasted a ton of time and energy and there's no chance of a deal in the future. The key is knowing when it's just not going to work.
Okay, so you've got your 4 possible outcomes. Now, the book talks about avoiding single-issue negotiation. What's so bad about focusing on just one thing?
When you only focus on one thing, like the price, you're basically creating this win-lose situation. It's like a pie that can only be split so many ways.
Someone gets a bigger slice, someone gets a smaller slice.
Right. The book uses this great analogy of a juggler. They don't just keep one ball in the air.
They're juggling multiple balls.
Exactly. And in a negotiation, say you're a company buying a bunch of tablets, don't just get stuck on the price per unit. Think about other things.
Yeah.
Delivery, financing options, warranties.
Upgrades, training, support, all that stuff.
Right. Bring those other balls into play. That gives you more to work with.
So instead of haggling over price, you might agree to a slightly higher price if the seller throws in a better warranty or some training for your staff.
Exactly. You're finding those win-win opportunities by being creative.
And that highlights how negotiation isn't just a one-time event, right? It's ongoing, especially in relationships.
Yeah, totally. The book talks about asking for a raise. A lot of people think the negotiation starts and ends in that annual review meeting.
Right.
But really, you should be laying the groundwork from day one.
It's like building your case over time.
Exactly. Keep track of your accomplishments, show how your work helps your boss and the company, research what others in your field are making. It's about demonstrating your value consistently.
So when you do ask for that raise, it's not coming out of nowhere.
Exactly.
The book also talks about time and its role in negotiation, specifically mentioning the 80-20 rule.
Yeah, time is fascinating in negotiations.
Right.
The 80-20 rule, or Pareto's law, suggests that you get most of your results in the last bit of the time you have.
So like 80% of the work gets done in the last 20% of the time.
Something like that, yeah. We see it all the time, right? Projects, deals, everything seems to come down to the wire. The book even talks about seeing this in their negotiation seminars.
Like everyone's scrambling to finalize things at the last minute.
Right. And knowing this can be really helpful. If time is on your side, maybe you move quickly. But also, sometimes those deadlines aren't as solid as they seem.
They can be flexible.
Exactly. Like tax extensions, right?
Yeah.
Everyone freaks out about April 15th, but there's always the option to file an extension.
So don't let a deadline kill a deal if there's some wiggle room.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about outcomes, multiple issues, the fact that negotiation is ongoing, and the role of time. But what actually gives one side more power in a negotiation?
Well, it's not just about who has the fancier title or the bigger budget. The book lists several sources of power. Having options, for one. Knowing you can walk away from the deal.
Like having a backup plan.
Yeah, what they call your BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. The stronger your BATNA, the more power you have.
Like in that car buying example, if you're not stuck on one specific car, you can walk away and go to another dealership.
Exactly. Having knowledge or expertise that the other side needs is another source of power. And also your character, your ethics.
So being trustworthy gives you more leverage. Interesting.
It does. People are more likely to make concessions to someone they trust. Also, how invested each party is in the outcome can be a factor.
Like if one person desperately needs to reach an agreement and the other one doesn't, the less invested person has more power.
Right. And being willing to take calculated risks can give you power too.
Boldness, huh?
Yeah. The book also mentions having a team on your side. That can be powerful, bringing different skills and viewpoints to the table.
Right.
And something you might not expect, patience.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, often the person who can wait longer, who's not feeling pressured by time, can get a better deal.
So playing the long game can pay off.
He can. And then there's charisma, that personal power, the ability to inspire and persuade. The book mentions figures like St. Teresa, JFK, MLK.
Powerful personalities.
Right, people who just command attention.
And then, kind of surprisingly, the book says a lack of interest or desire can be a source of power.
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, but think about it. If you're buying a house and you're okay with either this house or that one, you have more leverage than someone who's totally set on one specific house.
You're not emotionally attached.
Exactly. Of course, this is assuming the seller isn't equally unmotivated.
Right. So it's all relative. Okay, so those are some sources of power. Are there any general rules to remember about power in negotiation?
Yeah, the book outlines 5. First, it's rare for one side to have all the power. Even if you're applying for a loan and it feels like the bank has all the cards.
You still have choices.
Right. You can choose which bank to go to, what terms you're willing to accept.
So even when you feel powerless, you still have some power.
You do. Second, focus on your own senses of power, not on what the other side might have.
Play your own game.
Exactly. Third, power only works if the other person recognizes it. Like that story about someone asking for an airport upgrade.
They just asked and they got it.
Right, because the gate agent was willing to give it. Sometimes you got to just try.
What's the worst that could happen?
Right. Fourth, power is always changing. It's not static. It shifts throughout the negotiation.
Dynamic.
Yeah. And lastly, you got to test your power. You never really know how much you have until you try.
Interesting. So power isn't this fixed thing. It's fluid. It's something you have to understand and use strategically. Now, to use that power effectively, you need to understand what the other side wants, what motivates them. The book compares this to being a detective.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
You're gathering clues, trying to figure out their goals, their priorities, what they're willing to compromise on. You're listening carefully, but also watching their body language.
It's more than just the words.
Way more. The book talks about 2 main types of questions, restrictive and expansive.
So restrictive questions are like those yes or no questions, right?
Yeah. Closed-ended questions, they're good for starting a conversation, confirming details, maybe pushing for a small concession.
Okay.
But to really get deep into what the other person wants, you need expansive questions, the open-ended kind.
The ones that start with who, what, where, when, how, why.
Exactly. Those invite them to share more, to explain their thinking. They're not leading questions, you know.
And those open-ended questions are good for more than just getting information, right? The book talks about gaining participation and reducing tension.
Absolutely. When you ask good questions and really listen, people feel more involved, more heard. They might even like you more.
And you're learning about them while they're learning less about you.
Right. And this is super important if you sense things are getting tense or there's disagreement. Open-ended questions can calm things down, give you insight into their concerns.
So instead of arguing, you're trying to understand.
Exactly. Even a little humor can go a long way. A well-placed joke can diffuse tension like nothing else.
So going into a negotiation with a plan for your questions is key. You're guiding the conversation.
You are. And the more you understand about the other person, their personality, whether they're relationship-focused or task-focused, the better you can tailor your questions. And always remember, why?
What?
Why are they saying this? Why are they taking this position? That gets to the heart of their motivation.
Got it. But asking questions is only half the battle, right? You have to actually listen to the answers. And the book has this kind of depressing statistic about how much we actually retain from what we hear.
Yeah, it's a little humbling. Most people only remember about 50% of what they hear right after a conversation. And after 48 hours, it drops to 25%.
Wow, that's terrible.
It is. So active listening is crucial. It's about being objective, understanding what the other person really means, not just what they say.
And trying to figure out their intent.
Right. The best negotiators are great listeners. They pick up on those little cues, both verbal and nonverbal.
So what are some things that get in the way of good listening?
Well, sometimes our own biases get in the way. We filter what we hear through our own beliefs. Or we're already thinking about what we're going to say next, so we're not really paying attention.
I do that all the time.
We all do. And our emotions can distort what we hear, too. We only hear what we want to hear.
So how do we become better listeners?
The book has some tips. First, you got to actually want to listen. Know that the information you get is valuable. Set goals for what you want to learn.
Be intentional.
Exactly. Shut out those mental distractions. Focus on the other person. Take notes if it helps. Ask clarifying questions. Be patient. Look them in the eye. It shows you're engaged.
Makes sense.
And every so often, summarize what you've heard to make sure you understand. It also shows them you're listening.
And then there's this idea of interactive listening, which takes things up a notch.
Right. That's about being more active, more empathetic. It's about understanding their feelings, even if you don't agree with them.
Walking in their shoes, so to speak.
Exactly. Reflecting is a big part of this. Acknowledging their emotions without judgment, without offering solutions right away.
Just validating their feelings.
Right. It makes them feel heard. The book has some great examples of these reflective statements.
And the book offers a simple rule about listening. 2 ears, 1 mouth.
Yeah, use them proportionally. Listen more than you talk, and you'll be amazed at what you learn.
Okay, so good listening is key. But we communicate with more than just words, right? Body language plays a huge role. And the book spends a lot of time on that, even referencing experts like Joe Navarro and Gerhard Gschwandtner.
Yeah, nonverbal communication is powerful. It's that whole actions speak louder than words thing. And when we see a mismatch between what someone's saying and how they're acting, we tend to believe their body language more.
So it's about being aware of those nonverbal cues.
Exactly. The book talks about 3 stages of nonverbal negotiation. First, you just start noticing the other person's cues. Are their arms crossed? Are they making eye contact? Are they fidgeting?
Like picking up on those subtle signs.
All right. Then you become aware of your own body language. What message are you sending? Is it matching what you're saying?
That self-awareness.
Exactly. And the third stage is making sure your words and your body language are aligned. You're sending a consistent, trustworthy message.
You're walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly.
And it's important to look at the big picture, right? Not just one gesture in isolation. Like crossed arms might just mean someone's cold.
Totally. Context is everything. You have to consider the situation, their cultural background, your relationship with them. Look for patterns in their facial expressions, head movements, posture, gestures.
You're piecing together the whole puzzle.
You are.
Okay, so we've talked about outcomes, juggling multiple issues, the importance of time, different sources of power, asking good questions, listening well, and paying attention to body language. But what really ties all of this together, it seems like trust is crucial.
You're absolutely right. Trust and rapport are essential for successful negotiation. And the book gives some great advice for building trust. Be genuinely interested in the other person.
Like actually caring about them, not just seeing them as a means to an end.
Right. Make sure your actions match your words. Do what you say you're going to do.
Keep reliable.
Exactly. Go the extra mile. Offer to help them with something unrelated to the negotiation.
Show you're invested in the relationship.
Exactly. And underpromise and overdeliver. That always builds trust. Be prompt, be responsive, be helpful.
So basic good manners go a long way.
They do.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to use empathy. Try to understand their perspective.
Put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah. And if you mess up, apologize sincerely. If you don't know something, admit it.
Honesty is the best policy.
It really is.
Okay.
And sometimes taking a calculated risk to help the other person can build a lot of trust.
Showing you're willing to put your neck out for them. So it's about moving beyond that transactional mindset and building a real connection. Now, the book introduces this interesting idea of dolphin negotiation. What's that all about?
It's this great metaphor from a book called Strategy of the Dolphin. The authors say there are basically 3 types of people in negotiations.
Okay.
Sharks, who are super competitive, always looking to win. Carp, who are kind of passive and tend to give in easily. And then there are dolphins.
Dolphins, interesting.
Right. Dolphins are adaptable, intelligent, creative. They learn from their mistakes, and they believe there's enough for everyone. They're not playing a zero-sum game.
So a dolphin negotiator isn't trying to crush the other side or roll over and play dead.
Exactly. They're looking for that win-win. They want to create something new, something bigger than what either side could do on their own.
Like building synergy.
Exactly. They're good at building trust, figuring out what the other person really needs, and while they're not afraid to stand up for themselves, they're also quick to forgive.
So they're tough but fair. It's interesting to contrast that with the shark and the carp. The shark just wants to dominate.
Right.
And the carp just wants to avoid conflict.
Exactly. And neither of those approaches is very sustainable in the long run. The dolphin, by looking for mutual benefit, creates better relationships and outcomes.
And that makes sense. Now, we all have different personalities and ways of communicating. How do those individual styles play into negotiation? The book mentions the platinum rule here.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. Recognizing that people are different is so important. We all know the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated, but the platinum rule takes it a step further.
It's about treating people the way they want to be treated.
Exactly. Adapt your approach to fit their personality, their communication style.
So you wouldn't necessarily talk to a shy, detail-oriented person the same way you'd talk to a busy executive who just wants the bottom line.
Right. Some people need lots of information. Others just want the key takeaways. Some like to move fast. Others prefer to take their time. It's about being flexible.
Reading the room, basically.
Yeah. The book mentions these personality assessments like Myers-Briggs and the SDI, which can help you understand these different styles.
And for our listeners who are curious about their own negotiating style, the book recommends some online resources.
Yeah, they can go to peterstark.com/negotiator evil and peterstark.com negotiator style. Those can give you some good insights into your own tendencies.
So self-awareness is key.
Totally. Knowing your own style and being able to adjust to others is a huge advantage in any negotiation. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on the principles and psychology of negotiation. But before you even start negotiating, there's one crucial step: preparation.
The book quotes Robert H. Schuller, who said, "Spectacular achievement is always preceded by spectacular preparation."
I love that quote. It really emphasizes that preparation is key. Both sides in a negotiation have certain advantages. Like the seller knows their costs, the buyer can shop around.
Right.
But the goal of preparation is to level the playing field, to give yourself the best chance of getting to a win-win.
So what kind of questions should we be asking ourselves as we prepare?
The book has a really comprehensive list. What do you want to get out of this negotiation? What do you think they want? What are your options if you don't reach an agreement? What are theirs?
Your BTNA.
Exactly. What are your underlying interests? What are theirs? What leverage do you have? What leverage do they have? Is there any objective data that supports your position?
You're thinking about everything.
Yeah, the context, the relationship dynamics, how time might play a role. It's about being thorough.
So you're going in with your eyes wide open.
Exactly.
And there are logistical things to consider too, right? Like whether to negotiate as a team or solo, where to hold the negotiation.
Right. Both team and solo negotiation have pros and cons.
Yeah.
Negotiating on your own turf can give you an advantage, but it's not always possible. And the agenda, who sets it, how detailed it is, can influence things too. But the most important thing is the quality of your preparation.
So regardless of the logistics, you got to do your homework.
You do.
But sometimes, even with the best preparation, things get stuck. You reach an impasse. What then?
Impasses are a normal part of negotiation. The book has some good advice for dealing with them. One is brainstorming. Come up with some new ideas, something neither of you thought of before.
Think outside the box.
Exactly. Sometimes you just need to adjust your expectations a little bit, be willing to compromise.
Yep.
Or maybe there's a third solution, something completely different that meets both your needs.
That you hadn't considered before.
Right. Contingency agreements can help too. Like, if this happens, then we'll do that. It helps bridge the gap when there's uncertainty about the future.
Okay.
Taking a break can be helpful too. Let things cool down, come back with fresh perspectives.
Step away from the table.
Yeah. But if you do take a break, make sure you set a specific time to meet again. And if all else fails, bring in a neutral third party, a mediator.
Yeah.
They can help you see things from a different angle.
So there are ways to get unstuck.
There are. Now, so much negotiation happens online these days via email, text, phone calls. That changes the game, doesn't it?
Big time.
Yeah. It's got its pluses and minuses. On the plus side, you can be more objective. You have more time to think about your responses. You can easily get advice from others.
You're not put on the spot.
Right. But on the downside, you lose those nonverbal cues. It's easy to misinterpret tone. It's easier to disengage. And it can be harder to build trust.
And harder to brainstorm those creative win-win solutions.
Yeah.
So any tips for negotiating effectively online?
Be clear and concise in your writing. Keep it professional. Be responsive, but don't feel rushed. Make sure you understand each other. Don't assume anything. Be careful with your emotions. Be patient. Ask for help if you need it. And use the same strategies you'd use in person.
So the fundamentals still apply.
They do. Always reread your emails before hitting send. And be willing to switch to a different format if it's not working, like a phone call or even meeting in person.
Right.
And if you do meet in person after negotiating online, bring all your digital documentation with you.
Okay, good advice. Now let's get specific. A lot of people dread negotiating a raise. What's the best way to approach that?
Preparation is key. Build a strong reputation. Consistently go above and beyond. Know your worth. Research what others in your field are making. Use websites like salary.com, PayScale, Glassdoor.
Get that data.
Yeah. Know your target salary, your minimum, and your ideal. And prepare for your meeting. Document your achievements. Highlight how you'll add value in the future.
So you're not just walking in there empty-handed.
Right. Schedule a meeting in advance. Be professional. Present your case. Be aware of your body language. Ask open-ended questions. And if you reach an agreement, get it in writing.
Solid advice.
And if a raise is impossible right now, try to get a clear understanding of what needs to happen for it to be considered in the future. And always thank your boss for their time.
Even if you don't get what you want.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's flip it. What about when you're the buyer? What are some good tactics for negotiating a good price?
Research the item's market value. Don't seem too eager to buy. Know your target price, your ideal price, and your walkaway point.
So you have your boundaries.
Right. Start by offering your ideal price. Be willing to walk away if you don't get close to what you want. Try negotiating for a third party. It can make you seem more detached.
Interesting.
Negotiate on more than just the price. Take your time. Don't be pressured. Don't be afraid to say no.
Stand your ground.
Exactly. And try to have fun with it.
Right, it shouldn't be torture.
It shouldn't.
Okay, last thing. The book has this huge section called 101 Tactics. It's like a whole toolbox of negotiation techniques.
It is. And the book says we use these tactics all the time, even in our personal lives, like kids negotiating with their parents or couples deciding what to have for dinner.
It's everywhere.
It is. But the point is to become aware of these tactics, to recognize them when others use them, and to know how to counter them. The book breaks them all down, gives you a name for each one, explains how it works, and tells you what to do if someone tries it on you.
So you're not caught off guard.
Exactly.
All right, as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the big takeaways you hope our listener will remember?
I'd say the most important thing is to aim for win-win outcomes. That builds trust, strengthens relationships, and creates value for everyone. Ask good questions, listen carefully, prepare thoroughly, and be aware of different communication styles.
Embrace that dolphin mindset.
Exactly.
And what are some concrete steps our listeners can take after this?
Think about your own past negotiations. What worked, what didn't? How could you apply these principles in the future? And if you're curious about your own negotiating style, check out those online assessments we mentioned.
And start paying more attention to body language, both yours and others.
Yes, it's amazing what you can learn from those nonverbal cues.
So, to leave our listeners with something to ponder.
Yes.
If negotiation is something we do all the time in every area of our lives, how might consciously adopting that dolphin mindset that focus on mutual benefit and flexibility impact not just the deals we make, but the quality of our relationships in the long run?
That's a great question. A lot to think about there.
It is. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into negotiation.
My pleasure.
We hope these insights will help you navigate your next negotiation with confidence. And for an even deeper dive, we encourage you to check out the only negotiating guide you'll ever need.
It's a fantastic resource.
It is.